Last weekend I met with two of my friends from my regular Fate group and we played a one-shot where we tried to use as much as discovery play as possible. I will briefly retell what happened during that game and then give my impression of how all of that discovery play worked out for us. We started with 4 blank sheets of paper, pens, dice, and nothing else, not even a rule system. Because I thought we could discover that as well. And I said to my players, we'll just use basic D&D as I remember it, and explain the rules as they come up. First, we took one of the blank pieces of paper and each of us wrote down one aspect that would make up our gaming world. The first player wrote something like Harry Potter, which is not ideal since Harry Potter is really a complete setting in of itself. So I talked to her about it, and what she really meant was that she wanted this secret parallel magical work like in Harry Potter setting. So with that one aspect already, a secret magical world, we get a setting that is similar to Harry Potter or World of Darkness if we go really dark, or Dresden Files. The next player wrote something like Sherlock Holmes, which is again a complete setting. So I talked to him about it and found out that what he really meant was that we have detective stories in Victorian London. So with these two aspects we already got a pretty interesting setting, a magical world set in Victorian London. But last I wrote, the PCs are small animals like in Rescue Rangers, just for the fun of it. We had been talking about a setting similar to this, like Mice Guard or Mouse and Mystic, before we started playing, and I was surprised that none of my players had written something like that down already, so I just went for it. Then the players started making up the base concept, the first aspects of their characters, which was for us what kind of animal they are and what their names are. So we got Archimedes, the house mouse, and Sketty, the red squirrel. In the meantime, I used tarot cards to come up with the main villain. That is a method I use fairly often, and I will make its own video about that. So the villain became a doctor, philanthropist, and summoner. I also made him an owl, so he would be physically intimidating to the small rodent PCs. Because he was a philanthropist, I decided that he would have good motives, but he would be misguided in how he was going to achieve them. Since we were going for detective stories, I also had to come up with a crime and a client. I quickly settled on abduction as the crime, and I used tarot cards once again to come up with the victim and the client. So the victim became a monk, fortune teller, astrologist, and the client became George the church mouse. Church mouse is a little play on a German proverb that I don't think translates all that well into English. I printed out a map of Sherlock Holmes London I found on the net, and then we were good to go. My players decided that their detective agency was called Lost Knots and Other Hopeless Cases and had its office inside of Big Ben. So we start with a slow, rainy day. The detectives are in their office inside of Big Ben and have already given up hope that today anything will come up at all, when a drenched mice in a brown monk's cloak comes storming into their office, begging for the help. So we had a small scene inside the office where the detectives questioned George for all the information they could get, and eventually they accepted the case. And they took a taxi dog towards St. George Cathedral in London. I have no idea if there is actually a St. George Cathedral in London, but neither do my players, so we just went with it. There, they looked for clues in the monk's office. It was located in one of the cathedral's tall towers, where he had a telescope to look at the stars and divine the future. There they found some down feathers from an owl, and hidden among the notes of the monk there was a code. He had made errors in his calculations, and these errors contained a hidden message, a ritual of mighty divination magic. Then they started to look around further, and they found a secret door, and behind it a dark room. It was bigger on the inside than should have been possible. Stumbling through the darkness, haunted by some unseen monster, they eventually find a bright portal. Stepping through that portal, they come out back at their office. They conclude that this portal leads to wherever they desire most. So after resting and preparing for a few hours, they come back to the office. They look around a bit more for clues and find some old feathers at a ceiling window. Then they go back into the dark room and, wanting to go to the location of the missing monk, they go through the portal. It works, and they are brought to a cell in the Tower of London, where the poor monk, who looks a bit worse for wear, is currently sleeping on a wooden bench. They proceed to steal the keys to the cell from the human guards, and then muck about for a few minutes trying to get the door open. While they do that, they hear sudden wing flap from inside of the room, and the shoo-hoo of an owl. Then some sing-sang incantations. More wings flapping. When they finally go back into the room, the monk is gone, and some old feathers are left at the window. Using these old feathers, Sketty uses her transformation magic to let them both grow wings so they can go after the owl. It had taken them a few minutes, so they can no longer see the owl, but they spot that the highest window of the tower is alight. They go up there and are witness to a congregation of a secret organization of the rich and mighty animals of London. An owl is holding a speech, telling the others about the prophecies of the monk, that humanity will wipe out all life on Earth if they are not stopped. But the owl has a plan. They will replace the monk with one of their own and use his prophecies to trick humanity into destroying itself before they can take the rest of the planet with them. Archimedes goes out and tries to tell the secret organization that the monk had made errors in his calculations and the future they fear can't be real at all, completely missing the point that it was a secret message. But he generates enough of a distraction for Sketty to swoop in, grab the monk, who had been transformed into a toad so the owl could carry him away, and the two of them make their daring escape. Before they vanish into the safety of the canalization, they look back and they see an owl at the window, staring at them with big, angry eyes. So, How did discovery play work out for my group? I enjoyed the world creation. I think we ended up with a unique scenario that none of us had ever played before. Character creation was a breeze, and during the adventure, when we started rolling up the stats as we needed them, we found out that Sketty was actually a brilliant but fat klutz, while Archimedes is a physically capable idiot. That was fun to find out and play through, because initially we thought it would be the other way around. The rules were not a problem at all. We just needed strength, agility and intelligence, and I gave each of them 6 HP, and that was all we really needed. The rest we managed through role-playing. What did not work for me at all was improvising the plot. And that is something I usually do. But in a detective adventure, I like to know what clues I can give to my players and where those clues might lead beforehand. Those are really hard to come up with on the spot. And when I asked my players for their input, it was conflicting to what I already had in my mind, and it became even worse. In any case, me and my players had a good few hours of fun, and by the making of this video, they even asked me to master for them again and continue the adventures of Lost Nuts and Other Hopeless Cases Detective Agency. I think there is definitely potential in this discovery play method. Maybe I can create a few tools to use for both the GM and the players to make this style of play easier. Could be system agnostic too. What do you think? Is this something that would interest you? Or do you have already a favorite tool you use? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching and goodbye.